Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we're going back to the days of red rings and Spider-Man fonts. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I'm joined, as I am always joined by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great, but I have a question for you,
Oh,
Patrick.
here comes a question right out the gate.
What do you do while you're brushing your teeth?
What do I do while I'm brushing my teeth? Kinda nothing. I used to, back when I was a Twitter-addled fool, I would just scroll around on Twitter while brushing my teeth. But now I kind of like pace a little bit. Sometimes I walk into like the other room. I'm not a stationary brusher.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't just like stand in front of the sink.
No, and that's what that's my husband's like preferred way to brush his teeth. He wants to be like over the sink, which I appreciate. It works well because like you and as a fellow
sloppy
pacer.
brusher?
No.
Okay,
But as a fellow pacer, you know that 95% of the time you're in the clear, no problems at all. You can pace to your heart's content.
Yeah.
5% of the time, something goes wrong.
Oh,
There's a dribble. There's a
I don't know
cough.
about that.
What?
I don't.
You have 100% toothpaste and spit to sink ratio.
Yeah.
No dribble.
No dribble.
Wow. I'm impressed.
No dribble. No dribble. No.
Wow.
So I assume you have what an insane assumption I'm making here. Do you have some kind of electric toothbrush, or do you?
Oh, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't use an electric toothbrush. Yeah.
During lockdown and like the heyday of the pandemic, I got myself a Quip toothbrush.
Oh,
So it does and this is not sponsored, and no free ads from Nintendo Cartridge Society, but it does 30 seconds and then it like stops and then it like does 30 seconds again. So you do like the 4 quadrants of your mouth and then it stops altogether.
Yeah.
So like having that, like every 30 seconds being engaged by the toothbrush is just enough for me to be like, I'm like locked in and like doing this the whole time.
You don't get sloppy.
I don't get sloppy.
Your mouth is
Right.
containing
My mouth
the
is
spit.
Exactly. And after 2 minutes, I'm like, it's over, and now it's done. I'm not gonna like absentmindedly walk around the apartment for 5 minutes, and then get into some danger probably of dribbling out or whatever.
I mean, I just got to be honest. Me, 2 minutes, still in the danger zone.
Okay.
I'm like walking around, I'm doing things, I'm like bending
Talking to
over,
people.
picking things up. Yeah, exactly. Answering phone calls, writing thank you cards.
Right.
Yeah, occasionally there's just like again, most of the time, perfect. It's a dream.
Sure.
But like 5%.
One time in 20.
There's there's and I'm in awe that has never happened to you. Your mouth retention, I think, is just really impressive. Is what I'm getting at.
Thank you. We've been recording this podcast together for 6 years, and I've been waiting for those words in that order for most of that time.
You've never complimented my mouth retention, but now we know with good reason.
Yeah, now we know that I shouldn't. If you would like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society, where you can support us with money if you feel like that is something that you would like to do. We appreciate it when you do, but you certainly don't have to. If you support us at the 8-bit or 16-bit levels, you get access to our monthly episodes of miniseries that we put out. We did one about detective shows called NCS Detective Club. We are currently doing one called NCS Goes Broadway. The next show we're talking about is Les Mis.
Yeah.
Les Miserables.
Super excited for that conversation.
Me too.
Also, if you are a member of the Patreon, you can vote to decide what the next mini-series will be, and that'll be coming up in just a couple of months here. We'll be moving on to something else, and you can help determine what that something else will be.
So thank you to all of our current patrons. Thank you to all of our future patrons. And thank you also just, for listening to the show and supporting us in whatever way you deem appropriate. You can also hop on our Discord, which is where people are talking about Nintendo stuff all the time, you can email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com, and we will send you an invitation to the Discord, and then you can get in there and chat to your heart's content. It is a great, fun place full of fun, interesting, and interested people. So get in there.
Also, you can check us out on last week's episode of the Reactivators podcast.
That's right. Maybe like a month or two ago, we had Tyler Schnupp on our show to talk about the Street Fighter movie, and we went on Tyler's show to talk about Metroid Fusion. But be forewarned, there's actually not that much talk about Metroid Fusion. It's a very silly show. Mark and I get a little unglued in it, and it's a very fun time. So check out the Reactivators from last week. Mark, are you ready to get into it? Are you ready to? Well, I'm gonna play the transition music, and then I want you to pitch what the topic here
Okay,
is.
perfect.
Let's do it.
I'm ready. Okay, so we are in a time of like Nintendo Switch releases where we're beginning to see these ports of PS3 and Xbox 360 era games making their way to Switch.
And here we're specifically citing
Red Dead Redemption came out last week.
Right.
And in October, we have the Batman Arkham games.
Right.
And, we've in the past, we've had a handful of others like the Burnout Paradise from EA was a PlayStation 3 era game.
Portal, the Portal collection, that has Portal 2 in it, which is a PS3 era game.
And this,
so this is actually because also LA Confidential.
Yeah, that's true.
That was within like the second year of the Switch's life. So like, this isn't untapped territory necessarily. A lot of these games, Okami, have already been like brought over to Switch throughout the course of the thing's lifespan, but it just seems like it's kind of bubbling up a little bit more right now. And Red Dead Redemption is such a big example of it, especially because they're not doing anything to it.
Right. It's just like here
it is.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah. But it also like sort of represents a ribbon of nostalgia that's like, it feels for me, because I'm 40 years old, too close to be like true nostalgia, right? Like I only recently I came to accept that like PlayStation 2 era is nostalgia. Like, okay, fine, GameCube, sure, fine, that's all nostalgia. But the 360 PS3, like that still feels like kind of current, even though I can look at a game like Batman Arkham Asylum and be like, oh yeah, like we've learned things about game design since then.
Right. Yeah, and some of
great game though.
like the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, like at least some of the games that I'll be talking about today came out like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We're right in between that 10-year nostalgia cycle and 20-year nostalgia cycle. And the 20 years nostalgia cycle is especially hot and heavy usually.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see what like more of these games we see in the next 10 years. But I also feel like we're at this point in the Switch release schedule where these are standing out more, because it's like, why did it take so long for these to start showing up,
Yeah, well, and the whole period is so strange because like PlayStation 3, because of the way that thing was the system structure of that thing, its cell processor and all this garbage made it a tough to develop for, and B tough to emulate going forward. So like there's not been backwards compatibility to PlayStation 3 games like ever, and there won't be.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you can play Xbox 360 games currently on whatever Xbox you have, right? So like there are kind of parallel tracks here of like these versions of games are wholly inaccessible in the PlayStation ecosystem, wholly accessible in the Xbox ecosystem, and then occasionally popping up on the Nintendo ecosystem.
Also, this was a time that for me personally, like I owned a Wii and a DS and was playing a ton of both of those. But also, I was just doing a lot of playing video games in general. So
Yeah.
I owned at the start of the generation a Xbox 360, and I played a ton of Xbox 360 games.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was super into Call of Duty. I was super into like Fallout. Like there were the most tapped in I think I've been into like the Xbox and PlayStation kind of like ecosystems
Yeah.
was that era.
Well, and like sort of, I feel like at the beginning of the like PlayStation 4 generation, you were keyed into
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, that definitely trickled over into the PlayStation 4 because I got my Xbox 360, and then all of my friends got PlayStations, and so I ended up with a PlayStation 3 at the end of the generation, and then that turned into buying a PlayStation 4. And yeah, I played and
Right.
since I didn't own a Wii U, like PlayStation 4 was my primary gaming console really until the Switch came out and
Yeah.
we like
Yeah.
really got into doing this show, and then it's all kind of like shifted to focusing almost entirely all my time's on Nintendo now.
And the other thing that's sort of interesting about the for a Nintendo fan about the 360 and PlayStation 3 era is that the gulf between what the Wii could do and what the competitors could do was and would do, right, was huge. Like this is everyone else going into high definition, into having like online storefronts that were like standard, that like every game you could buy digitally, and the Wii just not doing any of that, right?
Yeah, not even like being interested.
Right. Well, and the Wii doing things that the other platforms also weren't interested in too. Like, we always cite the like Nintendo's doing their own thing, but like this was the first time that seemed intentional. Because the GameCube was, it was different, but like kind of chasing the same dragons, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of games that were big in that third-party games, especially that were big in that era, that just don't feel like they are part of Nintendo's core identity, because they weren't when they originally came out.
Yeah, a lot of these they weren't on the Nintendo hardware of the time.
Yeah.
Like the contemporary Nintendo hardware, and they've never been on Nintendo hardware since.
So what we've done, right, is make a list of 3 to 5 PlayStation 3 / Xbox 360 games that have not already been ported to the Nintendo Switch that we would like to see come to the Nintendo Switch.
And all third-party games.
All third-party games. Yeah. Well, because yes, if I were just like, whatever, it would probably all be Last of Us, Uncharted,
Right,
2, Uncharted 3.
right.
Those infamous games. Oh, those were good. But no, that's not. We're like within the realm of realism. As we do this, Mark, did you find any like patterns emerging, or should we talk about the patterns that emerge as we reveal the games that we brought for this exercise?
Yeah, the only pattern that I perceived while I was doing it was, man, there were a lot of Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games that I really loved playing.
Yeah. I mean, I almost had the opposite. I know there were a lot of games that I liked playing, but I had like this moment of like, and I'm fine with those experiences being back where they were. Like I already alluded to Batman Arkham Asylum. I love Arkham Asylum. I love Arkham City. I think those are great games. And they are coming to Switch. And I'm like, why would I pick those up?
Oh, I do feel that way about the Batman games. But I feel like I think if most of the ones on my list came to the Switch, I would be interested in buying them.
I don't know if the same is true about my list.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
So,
I think that'll be. But also, one thing I think is funny is like, three of my 5 are absolutely available on other platforms today. Like, I could probably get them for $2 on Steam.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's like,
for sure. And probably all of these you could play on your Xbox right now.
Right? Yeah,
through
exactly.
Backwards compatibility.
So it's not. So like, I am
actually one of these. No. One of mine. No.
I think maybe 2 of mine. No. 1 for sure. No. But
maybe also 2 of mine. No.
But in general, it's like, this is not me complaining that these games aren't accessible in any way.
Right,
because
right.
I know that I could play these easily if I like put in the effort.
Right.
But that's not what this exercise is.
Which is also like doing something like this and being like, oh yeah, you can just play this on Xbox. Really like throws into like harsh relief that like no, Nintendo should be doing way better at facilitating like if not backwards compatibility, then just like yeah, put some GameCubes up on the eShop. Who cares? Just let us buy them.
I totally agree. It totally, and also just reinforces that like next generation's got to be fully backwards compatible.
It has to be.
Yeah.
There's no way. If I can't bring my Switch library onto whatever comes next, I'll complain about it and buy everything again. Slowly over the course of time, subscribing to some sort of service. Mark, I'm going to go first.
Yeah, please do.
Because I'm going to start by doing a game that released as an Xbox 360 exclusive that would later come to just about every platform, including in some form to the Wii. I'm referring, Mark, of course, to Dead Rising.
I love it. It's on my list too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I figured it might be because we have shared our affection for Dead Rising. This is a game that came out originally in 2006, the very early days of HD gaming. I remember my friend Alex putting it up on my TV. I was one of the few people who had a high definition widescreen TV. And he was like, oh, cool. I could actually read the text on the screen. I couldn't read it before. So we're trying to play the game on like a CRT TV and it was all just got like squished and it was too small. But Dead Rising is a bizarrely effective open world game that takes place in a mall. You play as photojournalist Frank West over the course of 3 days that take place in not real time, but like, I think every hour is like 15 minutes or something like that. So like pretty, I mean, not genuinely real time, but it is a scarily open world game where you are rescuing people and there are zombies in this mall. And that's kind of it. Like you just got to figure out your priorities, how to get things done in certain amounts of time, how to not get killed by the psychopaths. Everything is a weapon. You can go into like, the Reebok store and like get new shoes. You can go into a bookstore and learn new skills from reading books. It's truly like the open world of the Willamette County Mall is so compelling to me because it feels like you're running around a mall. It is the shopping center that I probably know the best because I've run around it way more than any other mall I've ever been to.
Yeah, I really love this game. It's been years since I've played it, and so how many of the other games in the franchise have you played? I've only played Dead Rising 2.
I dabbled in 2, but like 1 is the only one that I've beaten or even sunk any actual time into.
Because 1 is so unique. Like as in 2 they started immediately to kind of like make it more approachable is not the right word because I think Dead Rising is approachable.
Yeah.
But Dead Rising is a game that like you're just not gonna be able to do everything in one go. Like
until you like until you understand all the underworking systems.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to do it on your first go.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to like replay it if you want to like really understand it because everything is timed. And so if you like want
that clock never stops.
And it never stops.
Nuts.
So if you want to like rescue this person, that means that you have to take the time to do that. And that may mean that you're not able to do this other thing, like go to this boss who is only there for a certain amount of time, or like there's all these different
and the game
trade-offs.
The game doesn't mind either, like locking you out of like, oh, if you miss this like story beat because you're not over there, then it just doesn't happen, and like you can play out the rest of the couple days until like the military comes to bomb the mall, but like. And you can still get people like out, but it's like you can genuinely just like stop progression in different story elements. It's very cool.
It is really cool. And there's never, there's been sequels to the game, but there's never been a game like the first Dead Rising.
Yeah.
Also for its time, like there were so many zombies on the screen.
So many zombies on the screen. Yes.
And Patrick talked about it in his intro to the game.
Chop till you drop, baby.
Yeah. So it was a Wii version. It wasn't a port really. It was like a Wii version that was running on the Resident Evil 4 Wii engine.
Right, and as such, and was so therefore using like pointer controls for like gunplay, and as such, really leaned into the gunplay. There was more ammo for guns. The original game, like your weapons are mostly like baseball bats and chainsaws and stuff. There are guns, but they were just like hard to use, and not a lot of bullets. So like that was one change, and then Mark alluded to the number of zombies on screen. Guess what? You weren't getting on the Wii is a large number of zombies on screen.
Yeah. And I have some fondness for those weird attempts to get these like
Yes.
franchises, because there's another one on my list that also had its like own weird attempt
Awesome.
to get onto the Wii.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, definitely not the same game. And I just think this would be so fun to play in handheld mode.
I think so too. I mean, yes.
Like yeah. And so I would love to see, and I know the series, at least for a while, was like an Xbox exclusive. I don't think that's true anymore. I think all the games eventually ended up multi-platform.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think it's possible like the most recent one was an Xbox exclusive as well. That's Capcom sort of has it set aside for. Did we mention already that this is a Capcom game?
I'm not sure if we did.
It was based on the Resident Evil 4 engine, so yeah, could have been implied. But yeah, it's definitely been on PlayStation platforms before, and like we said, Wii. So yeah, it seems like not impossible. I also think Dead Rising does a very good job of landing on a tone that is neither too goofy nor too serious. Future games in the franchise would kind of go the way of Zombieland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, isn't it crazy? Isn't it funny? Isn't it ridiculous how many zombies you're killing? The zombies always felt like a threat in the original Dead Rising, even though you could plow through like a whole crowd of them. It just felt like there were stakes to it, even though Frank West is like a doof.
Right.
And like has some, it's just he's a doofus. But he's like lovable and fun, and like I don't know. I think the tone is really smart and really unique, almost threading the same needle that like Resident Evil could do for a long time until they like tip over too much into like the scary direction or too much into the campy direction. It's just so good and dialed in.
Yeah. What a remarkable game. And I would love to see it, just like you. I would love to see it come to Switch.
Isn't it wild that there are so many sequels to Dead Rising and like we've just like never been taken by any of them? And I feel like culturally, I've not heard much about the rest of them.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I remember having a lot of fun with Dead Rising 2 when it came out. But it just doesn't have. I think it just became kind of like samey, and
Yeah.
there's something about being like the first. It was such a showcase for what the 360
Totally.
or
Yes.
like
And
could
just
do.
HD gaming in general.
Exactly, and like so many characters on screen, and it's so weird. It's such a weird, like you said, perfectly balanced between being really like funny, but also taking like the threat seriously. It's really inventive, and
Yep.
as it's kind of like lost those things to make it more, I think, like commercial, to make
Yeah.
to make it more appealing to the masses. I think it just became more generic. It lost the thing that made it so interesting.
I think part of what made the game so funny, or what like helped achieve like that side of the tone, is that things that the player could choose to do, right? Like, you could play the game where like your weapons are all like guns and chainsaws and axes, or you could go to the toy store and you could get like a Mega Man like Mega Buster that shoots Nerf balls, and they don't deal much damage,
Right.
but like you can do it if you want.
Also,
You can heal yourself by drinking a jug of orange juice, which he does in one gulp and then wipes his mouth with his sleeve. Like, it's all things that the player chooses to do that makes the game ridiculous.
I also think that the game isn't really like judgmental. Like,
No.
if you choose to not rescue survivors,
It doesn't
like,
care.
It
Yeah.
affects like the story, like the outcome of it, but not in a way where it's like punishing you
Yeah.
for like making that choice. And I feel like it's really good in that way.
Yeah,
Of
that's
just
interesting.
letting you have the experience that like you want to have, and not like yeah, you get locked out of content, but it's not. I don't feel like you have less of an experience. You just feel like you have a unique experience.
Yeah, and it's also like not nihilist about it either, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's not like, the characters in game are never going to be like, well, forget them. They're like, like it's all it all feels like real and like you're genuinely choosing what you value to do with your time in that game.
Yeah.
Really a remarkable balance.
It really
game.
is.
Yeah.
Ooh, makes me want to play it. Wish it came to
Not
Switch.
till it comes to Switch.
Well,
that's not part of this, right? Is that we're not like making a pact to not play these games?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Because someday I'm gonna get an Xbox and all of these are backwards compatible on there.
You've been threatening that for a while,
and I will continue
okay.
to do so. You know what? I'm going to keep us in the Dead Space. Literally, I guess, because
Dead Space?
my pick is Dead Space,
Yeah.
the 2008 survival horror game. Oh man, I'm embarrassed. I'm blanking on the studio that developed it. They don't exist anymore, I don't think, but published by EA in 2008, and
recently remade.
Yeah, that's right, in January of this year. And I haven't
Visceral Games.
Yeah. So I haven't played the remake, although I'd be interested in it someday when I pick up this mythical Xbox. But I really wish the original Dead Space, and I've played Dead Space 2 and I really like Dead Space 2. I have not played Dead Space 3. I feel like it doesn't have a very good reputation, but I'd be interested in checking it out.
They all trend more action-y as they go on, right?
And I think the third one is co-op, I want to say, but I can't remember for sure. But the first two are great, but if I had to choose one, I would choose the first one to go back to. I loved Dead Space. It was the perfect kind of like, let's take what we liked about Resident Evil 4 and put it in space type, game.
It absolutely took the crown that Resident Evil dropped on the ground.
Yeah, it was just because Resident Evil was going in a different direction in this generation, right? Like 5, it did have co-op and just became more action-y. 6 took it all the way. This was more, like, Dead Space was more focused on the isolation, you don't have a lot of ammo. The enemies were really, like, scary and cool, and one of the big kind of like features of the game is this idea that a lot of the enemies have like lots of limbs, and you had this really precise like laser gun type thing where you could just like slice off their limbs, and that would affect how they could like attack you or approach you.
Ugh.
But the game is also just like, it has such a good sense of atmosphere. The story is interesting. Dead Space is just really good, and I wish I could play it. It's another one. Be great to play portably. I wish I could play it on Switch.
It is weird that, and I guess they just don't want to like confuse the market, because like even was Dead Space the remake called Dead Space Remake, or was it just called Dead Space?
I think
again?
It was just called Dead Space. But
yeah, so they're just trying to like replace it in the marketplace.
But that being said, like I don't think it would have confused people if it was like the remake is going on these platforms,
right? And
we're getting like Switch. We're also releasing the original game. We're bringing it to other platforms. Or sometimes they
Dead Space Classic.
Exactly, yeah, I would buy it. This is another one that had a strange Wii spinoff. So
Extraction.
Is Dead Space Extraction, which was an on-rails shooter.
Mark, are we ill in that we know the names of these Wii spinoffs off the top
I
of our
bought
head
them.
a moment?
I bought them. So I remember playing Dead Space Extraction. But so it was another one where they were like, we obviously, they didn't even try a chop till you drop type version of it.
Yeah.
Where they tried to like bring the experience of Dead Rising to the Wii. This was just kind of like, it's set in the Dead Rising world. You'll have the same sort of like enemies and that sort of thing, but it's an on-rail shooter.
Yeah, just like the Umbrella Chronicles games on the for the Resident Evil games on Wii that were just light gun games, basically.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have you ever played Dead Space?
No, never played Dead Space.
I think you would really, really like it.
I'm sure that I would. I have I've watched for me, like the point in my life where these systems were around was when I was living in Chicago. So I had a PlayStation 3, and my roommates had a Xbox 360. And I also had a Wii, so we like had access to everything. We were gaming omnivores at this time, but it meant that I spent a ton of time watching my roommates play video games. So I took in a lot of Dead Space, a lot of Halo during this time. So yeah, I feel almost better versed in especially the Xbox side of the library here, as a viewer than as a player. Dead Space is a great pick. I'm going to do the most me thing possible here. And for my next pick, I'm going to pick Street Fighter 4, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition.
I'm letting you add that to the notes because I don't even know where to begin.
I'll copy and paste all of mine.
I love it. I love it.
There later. So at first I was just like, well, I got it. Street Fighter 4 was actually the first game that I thought of when we were doing this exercise.
Sorry. This is all one pick, right?
This is all one pick.
Okay.
And if you'll notice, I have now in my first 2 picks done 5 Capcom games. This is the trend that I noticed. But yeah, these are all. I'm just putting these all under one category of Capcom fighting games that were ripping at the time. I had given myself a sort of forced hiatus from video games because I was just spending too much time like thinking about them, and it was as I was like trying to living in Chicago, where I was like, I need to like train myself into like how to be a writer, and so I was doing a lot of like writing spec scripts just for like practice, and was like, okay, I can't really be as disciplined as I want to be if I've got video games in my life, and so I cut them out for a while, and for a while I mean maybe like 4 months, right? But the thing that I was like, I simply cannot not play this was Street Fighter 4. It was coming out, and I was just like, that's it. I'm back on the habit is back and fully engaged. And I loved Street Fighter 4. It was, it'd been like kind of a while since I'd been actively engaging in fighting games, and this reignited my love for them, which carried on directly to Ultimate Marvel vs. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which is later re-released as Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which had, it's insane to me that they put out one Marvel vs. Capcom game since then. But it was sort of a bust. They didn't have any of the X-Men in it, which, like, Wolverine, as far as I'm concerned, is like, you need to have Wolverine in Marvel vs. Capcom. The games don't make sense without him. He's it's like him and Ryu. Like, you need them both. Anyway, great roster on both of those games. Street Fighter Cross Tekken was a bonkers concept. And then Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition was like a way to actively and effectively play Street Fighter Third Strike online for the first time ever. You can kind of do it now in the Street Fighter anniversary collection or whatever it's called. But the online edition had all these great training tools for each of the characters and for just like the game systems in general, and like little challenges for you to do. Like, it was just such a good representation of that game. There was like one, and it would just like set up discrete challenges and you would have to do them. And one of them is to recreate that moment from Evo of parrying Chun-Li's ultimate attack and then countering with Ken's ultimate attack. These are just great versions of fighters on the system, and Street Fighter 4 can obviously be played in other places, as can Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Those made sort of the leap to the PlayStation 4, which means you can play them now anywhere. But Street Fighter Cross Tekken, I believe, is orphaned on the PS3, and definitely Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition simply can't be played anywhere now.
And it never came out, but I remember part of the just the excitement around Street Fighter Cross Tekken was that there was also supposed to be a Tekken Cross Street Fighter.
Yes. So Street Fighter Cross Tekken was a Street Fighter game with some Tekken concepts. Tekken Cross Street Fighter would have been a Tekken game with some Street Fighter characters,
which
and
is
concepts.
Such a fun idea.
So fun, and weird that they never followed through on it. I guess I don't know if Street Fighter Cross Tekken was like commercially successful.
Yeah, I have no idea either. I also remember when Street Fighter 4, because I'm not super tapped into fighting games, have never been, but I remember when Street Fighter 4 was announced because it had been a decade since Street Fighter 3.
Yeah,
so
it's been a
like
long
it
time.
it had been a long time. People still love Street Fighter 2, and Street Fighter 4 looked awesome.
Yeah. One is sort of like, Street Fighter 3 people eventually came around on, and people are always sort of like softly supporting the Street Fighter Alpha series. But 4 was like, oh, it's back, right? And that's sort of when like it sort of reclaimed its prominence at like Evo and like fighting game tournaments and stuff. And then like the Street Fighter 4 was so good that it took, and Street Fighter 5 was so like clumsy out the gate that like Street Fighter 4 remained the base Street Fighter for a long time, like 2 or 3 years after Street Fighter 5 came out. And seemingly all of that has been now undone by Street Fighter 6 being like a polished, wonderful package. But like, I just don't want Street Fighter 4 to go away.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 was a big deal, and it sold really well. There was even wasn't there a 3DS version of Street Fighter 4?
Yeah.
I think there was.
I mean, there was a Vita version of Street Fighter Cross Tekken, so like I don't know what any of this means.
I love the idea of like having all of these fighting games as one pick, because Capcom loves bundling fighting games together on Switch.
Yes.
So that would be awesome to see them do something like that.
Yeah, I just want them back. Or if they want to do Marvel vs. Capcom 4, or maybe they would have to call it 5 now, whatever. Just give me Storm, give me Magneto, just make sure the X-Men are in it. That's all I need.
Great pick. My next pick is a game that you can play most of the Final Fantasy games on Switch now.
Sure can.
But you cannot play Final Fantasy 13.
No.
And it's hard to play Final Fantasy 13 anywhere. And
is it available on Xbox?
I don't know that it is. Maybe through backwards compatibility? Was it on?
I'm checking right now. Final Fantasy 13.
So when Final Fantasy 13 came out, I had a PlayStation 3 at the time, and I remember me and my friend were really excited for it, and I did not love Final Fantasy 13, but boy, do I love the idea of being able to revisit it and kind of like reevaluate it.
Yeah. It was on Xbox 360, so presumably it is playable on in the Xbox platform.
And I know that they did a PC port in like 2014, and apparently it doesn't run all that well. And so maybe that's why we haven't seen it ported other places like Switch. But I feel like a lot of times, kind of like you listen to a new album from your favorite band, and sometimes it doesn't click immediately. It's not as good as the hits from before, but then you revisit it a couple years later or whatever, and you're like, oh, actually, there's a lot to enjoy here.
Well, there's also the phenomenon, and this is definitely true in games, where you're like, oh, this is just what the band sounds like now. And when that's what the band sounds like now, it can feel like a bummer. But if it's like, no, this is just what they sound like for this period, then you can even go back and appreciate it as like, okay, now this is their experiment or whatever.
Yes.
And games, especially Final Fantasies, like benefit from this sort of like retrospective going back to them and being like, oh, this isn't Final Fantasy forever now. This is Final Fantasy 13.
Yes, and there is so much. You're 100% right, because there is a lot of that when you're in it, when you're in the middle of it. I mean, Nintendo's Wii U era, right? When you're in the middle of it,
totally,
you're like, oh God, what is happening?
Right.
But then it changes again, and you can look back on that era and view it in historical context and appreciate it more for what it is rather than what it isn't. And I want that opportunity with Final Fantasy 13. And it's another one I just want to play portably.
And its sequels, frankly. There are 3...
Which I've never touched.
Me neither. I've actually never touched any Final Fantasy 13 at all. But yeah, I mean, like, there are 3 of those games. And, like, Square Enix doesn't show that kind of commitment to any other... Final Fantasy 7. The 7 notwithstanding. But these are, like, 3 games that are, like, all... They're not even like spin-offs. They're just like, here's Final Fantasy 13, here's Final Fantasy 13 Part 2, here's Part 3. I know they have different names.
Yeah, like Lightning Returns.
Lightning Returns, yeah. Is that the third one?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
I think 13-2 and then 13 Lightning Returns.
Yeah.
And then Final Fantasy 15 started off as like a spin-off of...
That's right, because
13.
Final Fantasy 13 was supposed to be like a whole thing.
Right. And it seems like it was, right? I mean, 3 games is a lot.
But I think I feel like those spun out of necessity, because we talked about last week with the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, how like Game Freak is now struggling with the transition to
Yeah.
HD, and other companies had to do that 2 generations ago. And Final Fantasy 13 was emblematic of Square Enix's
Totally.
struggle to get into HD development. And so I feel like after kind of the other, like the Final Fantasy 13 Versus or whatever was going to be
Final
called,
Fantasy Versus 13.
yeah, before it turned into
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 15, like that kind of like got into development hell. We didn't get a Kingdom Hearts for a while, but they had to pump out something, and they already had the engine and everything,
So they
and
just
characters.
put it back out.
So
yeah.
and I think they were moderately successful, but I do think some of it was just out of necessity and not necessarily a deep like love for the world of Final Fantasy 13.
But I think it would be a huge pop. Final Fantasy 13 trilogy available on Switch. Like,
Yeah.
and therefore, I guess there's still 15 and 16 that wouldn't be on there, and
Or
14 and 11.
Yeah.
But,
But
yeah.
to your point, yes, like all of the non-MMO or like,
Right.
whatever. I think it would be momentous if 13 made it to Switch, and I would like to see that happen because I would like an opportunity to reevaluate it.
Yeah, great pick, and one that I would genuinely love to play, like get my hands on it and play a little bit.
And hey, maybe still wouldn't be that good.
Maybe it wouldn't be that good.
Totally possible.
But look, if there's anything that I love in this world, Mark, it's having Final Fantasy games on my Switch that I'm never going to play. For my next pick, we've been doing a lot of like Capcom, Square Enix, Visceral, as published by EA. Big gaming companies. My next pick is going to be Braid. Game from indie developer Jonathan Blow, who Braid was the game that sort of like brought him to prominence. And The Witness is the game that like made him a like legend. I would say. Witness, a game that like a first person puzzle game from like the PlayStation 4, Xbox One era, which was all about like seeing puzzles in the world, doing the puzzles, realizing the world is also a puzzle. And Braid is a much simpler concept than this that he does that they do so much with. It is a 2D side-scrolling platformer where you have the ability to reverse time. And that's it. And the way that all of the puzzles are solved by different things that can't be reversed through time, or whatever. Just really using this mechanic to its utmost, and then also weaving a narrative through it that is sort of half your experience playing the game and half, and I don't want to like spoil exactly, so forgive the cryptic language here. And like half like reading passages from books about like this character's life. I don't know. It's a really special experience. The art is amazing. The music is incredible. And it's one of those games where like you walk into a new screen and you're like, I am never going to figure out how to do this.
And it's a 2D platformer.
Yeah, that's right. 2D platformer. And you can just rewind time to like fix stuff. And it's a perfect little game.
It's also, and this is, I'm going to be pithy,
Yes.
but it's not meant to like denigrate the game in any way. But it was also like the first big sad indie game.
Absolutely. Yes.
Like, which now is like,
It's a genre.
It's a genre where
yeah.
you're like, yes, I'm playing this puzzle game that is actually about depression.
Right.
But this was when indie games were first becoming commercial. You had like, the Xbox Live Arcade.
Yep.
And so to have like an indie game like this that took the kind of like 2D platforming mechanics and did something more with it, not just gameplay wise, but with emotional storytelling, was really unique and made it very special for the time.
Yeah, and like obviously we would see so many other examples of this kind of thing, and even if it's not just like making it sad, like your Limbos or what have you, or like the Meat Boy games, like turning it into a like intense like gauntlet of platforming challenge. But like Braid really was the sort of standard bearer for this for a while, just getting out there in front and being like, yeah, doing something new with like a classic kind of game.
Man, I played Braid when it came out, and I have not played it since then. Man, I haven't thought about that game for a long time. It is kind of crazy for as much of a event as it turned out to be that it's not on more platforms. It's probably
Yeah,
on like Steam
it's
or
got to
something.
be on Steam, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, and in some ways, I do think it's kind of memory hold, just because like it started something, but then like there have been so many kind of examples of it since
Also,
then.
I can't really speak to it, but I feel like there was something with Jonathan Blow where
Yeah,
but I don't know what it was.
yeah.
So
I
just
mean,
putting it out there, I guess.
I think he's just like
A
a
jerk.
prickly pear. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's I think I like I don't think there are like any accusations or anything. I think he's just kind of a jerk. Which comes through in the game. Like frankly, like it comes through in Braid a little bit. I have a memory of when I moved out to Los Angeles. I drove out ahead with my brother to find an apartment while Sarah finished up like her last couple weeks at work. Um, and I found us an apartment, and like again I drove out here, and all I had in the car with me was like a suitcase, like a cooler, and a TV and the PlayStation 3. And I remember getting my apartment on Gramercy, the one that we lived in for several years, and having no furniture, except for this cooler and the TV and the PlayStation 3, and knowing no one in Los Angeles, and my brother had left in the morning, and Sarah was going to come in the next day. So I had a day wholly to myself with no purpose, no direction, no friends, nothing, but this empty apartment, and I started Braid over from the beginning and played through the whole game, and like that was my day.
Wow.
That was my like sort of day in limbo. Was spent playing Braid, and so I'll always associate that with that.
Man. That's a great pick. That is a great pick.
Thank you.
For my next pick, I am going to choose a game that was released on the PlayStation 3 exclusively, I believe, and has
Oh.
never been released anywhere since, which is a little bit of a shame. And I think it would be really cool to see it on Switch. And that's 3D Dot Game Heroes
Yes.
from 2010.
Was this not published by Sony?
No, it was published by From Software in Japan,
Oh, wow.
and in the US, I don't think it was published by Sony. I think it was published by.
Tell you what, Mark. Even if it was, I'm not going to invalidate the pick. I apologize for attempting to.
No, Atlas. That's who published it in the
Cool.
US. In the US. So 3D Dot Game Heroes is a kind of like it's like a celebration to old Zelda. In
And
a lot
also
of ways.
new Zelda, kind of.
Yeah.
It's also 3D.
It's I mean it's
Dot
it's like
Game Heroes.
it came out around the same time that Minecraft was first emerging, and it looks not dissimilar
Yeah.
to Minecraft. So imagine like the world of Zelda, like the original Legend of Zelda, done in Minecraft graphics, kind of, and that's basically what 3D Dot Game Heroes is. And it's not a remake of the original Zelda. It's a new game that plays very much like the original Zelda, except like when your sword is fully powered up, it's enormous. Like it literally takes up the entire game screen, and you can do just kind of like a clearing motion.
Yeah.
And like you have like blocks exploding and all that kind of stuff. But it's not an amazing game. It's not, the best game you've ever played, but it is so rare for us to get these like top-down Zelda view games anymore. And I mean, it was rare then. It's even more rare now. And it's a good time.
Especially outside of the indie space.
Also, it doesn't take. Oh yeah, totally. Also, it doesn't take itself super seriously.
Mhm.
So the loading screens have like jokes on them. There's actually a lot of in jokes to like Nintendo games within
that's
this.
fun.
Like being kind of like oblique since they can't call it out directly. But 3D Dot Game Heroes. I wish it was playable on the Switch again. It'd be super fun portably, but it'd also just be fun to experience again, especially since we don't know when the next time we're going to get a Zelda game of this ilk is going to be.
I mean, it's at least in part developed by From Software, right?
I don't think it was developed by them. I think they just published it.
Silicon Studio and From Software. I have this is me reading Wikipedia, so like I'm not any kind of expert on this, but like what would stop another one of these games from coming out.
I don't think anything. So my understanding of Silicon Studio, when I was looking them up earlier, I don't think they've published anything since like 2017. And I believe that this game started almost as like a tech demo to show off like middleware that Silicon Studio was developing, and they ended up putting the game together in like 10 months for Sony. So it was like middleware that they were showing off to show how easy it was to port something to the PlayStation 3.
Interesting.
And they ended up just creating a full game out of it in like 10 months. And so it's just a cute little fun curiosity that you don't see much like it anymore.
Seems like they also worked with Square Enix on the Bravely Default and Bravely Second games.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if yeah, I mean, yeah, it does seem like it's not a series, it's just the one game. But yeah, it seems like it's probably just dead, but could come back.
Well, and also that's interesting that they worked on Bravely Default and Bravely Default 2, because I feel like
Bravely Second.
Bravely
Default
Second
2 is the game that came out on Switch.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I forgot. Only because
And I swear I'm not being pedantic.
no, that's important. But
Yeah.
but I think that's interesting only because those are also in that spirit of like old school RPGs,
Yeah,
right?
great point. Yeah.
I mean, this is like an old school Zelda game, like adventure game, but interesting that they're in that like
their mind
retro
pointed
space.
to the past for
Yeah.
sure. All right, great pick. Mark, for my next pick, I was looking at. Do you have a rhythm game on your list?
I don't.
So this could have been kind of anything. This was the era during which my friends and I went Rock Band crazy, where we went Guitar Hero crazy. I mean, Guitar Hero 3, right? The one that finally had the drum set. And bass, and I guess they all had bass, but
Is
and
that
singing.
World Tour?
Maybe it was World Tour.
Because
Yeah.
I think 3 was like the great
That's
Guitar
right.
Hero.
That's right.
And then World Tour was when they introduced the band
opened
stuff.
it up. Yeah. But instead, I'm gonna go right to DJ Hero, because it was a bizarre game when they were living large on plastic peripherals that everyone could have in their house. DJ Hero had a turntable peripheral that had like 3 little buttons on it, and then like little sliders, and so like. The record was like a scratcher, and the gameplay was like in some ways like Guitar Hero, but in other ways you had to like fade back and forth between the 2 tracks that they were like mashing together, and like that meant that there were all of these like new and cool remixes of like pop songs with these like very DJ sounding, and like it genuinely did it. Like if you didn't slide over, like Gwen Stefani was just gonna be singing by herself without a beat under it. So yeah, it was a cool, bizarre little game with the like a price point that didn't make any sense because you had to buy this piece of plastic, and a library that was like ultimately too small because they had to like get people to arrange these things. But what a cool, weird experience, and especially when you lump it in with the rest of the sort of rhythm renaissance of the time, which like they try to bring back every now and then, but like it's just not in the cards anymore.
Yeah, you just can't, for whatever reason, recreate the that time and place where we were all on board for it. We were peripheral crazy.
That's it, right? Is that like you don't want those plastic guitars in your like, because it doesn't matter, like you can get the cool one, it still looks dumb in your living room, right?
Yeah, totally. Oh man, not DJ Hero, but so many Rock Band and
I know.
Beatles Rock Band. I mean, so crazy that existed.
I know.
But I never played DJ Hero, but I absolutely remember when it came out because it really was at the crest of the wave.
Totally.
That was these like rhythm games. That's so did you have one? Did you have like a
My
DJ
roommate
Hero?
Taylor had DJ Hero.
That's amazing.
So it was just in the pile of games that we all played together, and like it kind of went back and forth between being like a super fun, very cool experience and being like kind of lame. which like it's so much of whether you're enjoying it or not depends on like the quality of the remix and like the quality of the song to begin with. Whereas Guitar Hero is just like, oh yeah, they just pick like the best songs, especially like you said, Guitar Hero 3, where it's just like, yeah, it's all incredible stuff. And anyway, yeah, so we had one, we played it a lot, and I really, really liked it, but it's not a surprise to me that it didn't catch on. It was also coming out at like the exact same time that there was a Tony Hawk game that had that like the skateboard peripheral.
Uh-huh.
What was the name of that thing? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
So it was like Tony Hawk.
It was like Ride or something.
Ride sounds right.
Let's see if I can
Tony
Google
Hawk
it real quick.
Ride.
Yeah, Ride. Tony Hawk Ride.
Yep. And they both had the same price point for like the peripheral, which is it's just nuts.
Yeah, can't remember what all the amendments are, but can absolutely remember the name Tony Hawk Ride. So there we go.
There are a lot of amendments.
All right, my final pick is games that you absolutely can play basically everywhere, and yet I really, truly want them on Switch. And it's Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
I love so Fallout 3 is my Fallout game. It's the first Bethesda game like of this ilk that I ever played, and I put hundreds of hours into it. I scoured every part of the wasteland. I love Fallout 3. I love that game so much, but I played it so much that when New Vegas came out, even though I know New Vegas is supposed to be better, I had put so many hours into Fallout 3. I started New Vegas, played it for like 1 or 2 hours, and was like, I can't do this again.
Right. I just had this experience.
Yeah, I just had this experience, and I can't devote another 200 hours to a video game like this right now. And so I've never played New Vegas, and I would love to someday, maybe when I get that mythical Xbox that I keep threatening to get, or maybe when they bring it to Nintendo Switch.
And maybe they will bring it to Nintendo Switch. It does seem strange that they wouldn't have like gone back and done that, right?
The only thing I can think of is maybe like the cart it would require was too big, and they didn't want to pay the money for the bigger cart, but also just make them downloadable.
Yeah, which is what that is just what they do now. I mean, maybe the like, because Bethesda is owned by Microsoft now, so
yeah.
maybe the ship has sailed in that regard.
Yeah, at the beginning of the generation, we got Skyrim on Switch, and they even after they were acquired, they put out like the Skyrim like Anniversary Edition or whatever it was that the upgrade to it on Switch. And I feel like there were rumors or like a trademark or a rating or something for like a Fallout collection or Fallout Vault that it was rumored to be Fallout 3 and maybe New Vegas for Switch, but nothing has ever come of it.
And what was the name of the was it Outer Wilds? Outer Worlds.
It's Outer Worlds.
Yeah,
yes.
there we go.
By Obsidian, who developed New Vegas.
Who is also owned by Microsoft at this point.
Yes, that's right. And they announced an Outer Worlds 2, but Outer Worlds did get a port on Switch, and I did play that. I had a good time with it.
Right.
But it was no Fallout 3.
But it is in the same vein as Fallout 3.
Yeah.
Which I guess is why I brought it up and not as some weird non sequitur.
But it is very much like a Fallout game, but set in space.
And remember the Fallout
Vault?
Shelter?
Oh yeah, Shelter.
Shelter came out on. It also came out on like phones
on
too,
mobile,
right?
Yeah, but it is like a mobile game,
free to play. Yeah. But came out on Switch.
Yep.
So there you go. Mark, a great pick. Now we are to my final pick, and my final pick I believe will be coming to the Switch shortly. It is rumored, based on what we saw on a website. I'm referring, of course, to Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots.
Oh, yes.
Mark, a Metal Gear Solid game that I have not played.
I haven't played it 4 either.
I really, really, really love the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games. I also never got around to playing 5, so,
I feel like this is a Resident Evil type thing.
It is.
Because we also really love Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Up to Resident Evil. Like, I played 5. You and I tried to play 6.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I've never played 7, and I haven't
played most
Village.
of 5.
I played all of 5.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But Metal Gear Solid 4 is, by all accounts, the end game of the Metal Gear Solid series, and then they made more games after it. But like that, it is, 18 hours of nonstop ridiculous fan service, both paying off and complicating mythology that had been built up over the course of 3 previous games. And because I wasn't an early adopter to the PlayStation 3, which is when this game came out, is early in the game's life cycle, and because it's never been ported to anything else, I've just never played this game.
Do you know that
I want to have these experiences, Mark.
Do you know I remember the Discord around Metal Gear Solid 4, and I remember because the PlayStation 3 used Blu-rays, right? But the Xbox 360 still used DVDs, and so I remember them being like there being like memes, graphics on the forums that were like, oh, how many. Like, oh, Metal Gear Solid 4 was announced for Xbox 360, and they showed like 30 DVDs.
Sure,
and
how many
that's
discs
how many
it would take, right?
And this game is notorious for like its cutscenes, the number of cutscenes, the length of its cutscenes.
Yeah. I believe there's a cutscene towards the beginning of this game that's like 57 minutes long, and like that sounds so exhausting to me right now. But like, I'd like to, you know what I mean? Like,
I totally do. Yeah.
I just would like to, both this and Peace Walker, the PSP game, sort of remain trapped on those specific platforms, and they'll be presumably part of the Metal Gear Solid Collection Volume 2. Master, what was the name of this? I can't remember either. But like, they are like blind spots for me in a series that I really like. And then I wonder if I could play those and then be granted the peace to move on to Metal Gear Solid 5. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And maybe that is also the ghost of that Final Fantasy has on me, that I need to play Final Fantasy 13
again. You got stuck on 13
before I can move on to 15 and 16, before I can find peace.
Yes. So all right, great. We have our list. Should we recap them?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We both had Dead Rising.
And then I had Dead Space.
And then I had Street Fighter 4 Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike Online Edition.
Then I had Then I had Final Fantasy 13.
I had Braid.
I had 3D Dot Game Heroes.
Then I had DJ Hero.
And finally, Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas.
And I had Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. All right, Mark, let's close this out. Would love to hear from our listeners what games from this era you would like to see brought over to the Switch. And remember, we're keeping with the sort of realistic parameters, so no like first-party Sony. I mean, whatever. Who cares? Yeah, I'd love to play Infamous 2 again.
Bring Halo 3 over. Why not?
Yeah, why not? It doesn't make any sense. It would never happen. But like, yeah, let's put them on our lists. So you can hop into the Discord or email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and let us know what notable games we missed. That's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Thank you so much to our 16-bit patrons, Connor McCabe and Patrice Millette. Thank you so much for the support at that level. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thank you for listening.